So who pays for a government bailout? That'd be you and I. The American taxpayer ultimately foots the bill for these bailouts to happen because those are what make dealers money. There's a larger profit margin to be had on higher trimmed examples. I do firmly believe that we can make a lot of positive headway if we adjusted how much we pay our auto manufacturer CEOs. For context, GM, General Motors, we pay Mary Barra, that CEO, just under $28 million per year. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, $26.5 million. Which is why a lot of people want that direct-to-consumer purchase model like we find with Tesla, right? But due to states' dealer franchise laws, it protects dealerships like this. It protects them for a number of reasons, right? They want to keep that labor force here. They don't want them to have any unfair competition. Now, a car market crash is good in the sense that we will begin to see phenomenal deals take place. Before a dealership closes their doors, if a government bailout doesn't happen in time and they actually have to go bankrupt and shut their doors, those are going to be the times where we will see the best deals possible. Hey YouTube, Untamed here. So the car market has been in shambles all throughout 2024. I do firmly believe we are heading toward a car market crash of 2025, which begs the question, will we see another government bailout? In today's video, I'm going to provide you with stats, facts, and figures that paint a picture of why we're heading toward another government bailout, what the good of a government bailout is, what the bad is, why I personally do not want to see it, and why I ultimately believe we will see a government bailout if push comes to shove, so stick with me. Since 2019, we have seen a 42% growth in MSRPs across the board. That's the average. Some are more, some are less. The average monthly payment on a new vehicle right now is over $760. The average national monthly payment on a used vehicle purchase is $525. The average new vehicle purchase price, $48,405, which is quite staggering in and of itself. But then you combine insurance premiums. We've over doubled the amount that we pay in insurance over the last 2.5 years across the board. Many states are seeing a 60% growth rate year over year when it comes to insurance premiums, which is quite staggering. When it comes to interest rates, we are seeing a national average of 7% for a new vehicle purchase. 11% on a used vehicle purchase. Again, that is not good and it doesn't bode well for you and I, the consumer. It doesn't bode well for the dealerships either. They can't move that inventory. 1 out of 6 auto loans right now is over $1,000 per month. 1 out of 6. 1 out of 5 auto loans applied for throughout this last quarter, they were denied by banking institutions. Banks are clamping down, they're not having it anymore. Supply has far exceeded demand. There are 3 million brand new vehicles available within the US right now, and there's 2.2 million used vehicles available within the US right now. Those numbers alone aren't too staggering. The alarming bit is the growth rate. We have seen 120% growth since 2023. That's staggering. We've actually gotten to the point where many dealerships are having to turn away their allocations and turn away their deliveries of new inventory because people are not buying the existing inventory. People are refusing to pay these huge price tags for these lesser quality vehicles, right? So right here in front of me, we have a number of Ford Bronco Sports. The final assembly point for these vehicles is Mexico. Just like the Toyota Tacoma over there, we're seeing a lot of auto manufacturers outsource production to cheaper labor countries and still hike that price tag up to astronomical levels. And people are just saying no, and well, they're clearly voting with their pocketbook. Here we have a whole lineup of Super Duty diesel pickup trucks that extend down to this side a little bit, followed by Ford Expeditions. The average price tag in here is somewhere between $82,000 and $85,000. Some of them are actually over $100,000 down there. But my point is, this is largely why we are seeing 1 out of 6 auto loans over $1,000. If you were to finance one of these $85,000 or $90,000 Expeditions here, you're easily looking at a monthly payment of over $1,800 a month. No thank you. Let's face it, people have been stretched far too thin for far too long, right? We now are seeing a national average negative equity of $7,200, meaning everybody who has an auto loan out within the US, well, they generally owe $7,200 more than what their vehicle is currently worth. That in and of itself is quite alarming. When you combine that with the national average of credit card debt being about the same, of $7,200, just over that, again, it begins to be a compounding issue. Then you pile on the cost of rent, the cost of mortgage, right? The cost of insurance, like we talked about, which is over doubled in the last few years. You pile all that stuff on, it becomes unbearable for most Americans, right? Which is why we're seeing a 23% increase in the repossession rates over this last year. That is huge. You know it's a red flag when you see so many unsold Ford F-150s sitting collecting dust on dealership lots right now. Many Ford dealerships are actually losing money month to month, which isn't too shocking because this technically is America's #1 selling pickup truck. throughout the last 47 consecutive years. But from where I'm standing, that doesn't appear to be the case. Many of these examples are 2024 units. Many dealerships actually have 2023 units still collecting dust. With 2025 models arriving now, well, they got to get creative, they got to get desperate if they're going to move that inventory. I seriously find it alarming with how many of these examples are over $65,000. Remember when you can go buy a Ford F-150 for like 35 to 45 grand, depending on the trim, but many of them here are just like this guy here. This is the F-150 Lariat, not even the top trim, but still over 70 grand is what they want for it. Just blows my mind. EV sales across the board, with the exception of Tesla, have done extremely poor throughout 2024. And the future does not look bright, especially when you look at the priorities of the upcoming administration, right? The Ford Mustang Mach-E is an example of an EV that didn't sell well at all, right? Even with government subsidies and tax credits applied to it, bringing the price tag down substantially. But when you combine that with the fact that they're built and assembled out of Mexico too, Americans just don't want this stuff. We talked about the national negative equity being at right around $7,200. That's largely due to greedy dealerships taking advantage of people throughout the pandemic, right? That's where they were charging these inflated price tags, marking up over MSRP on many examples just due to supply constraints, right? And they just took advantage. They're like sharks with blood in the water, and that is why so many people are belly up on their auto loans right now. I believe in karma, and I truly believe what goes around comes around. Many dealerships are experiencing that right now, and they're kicking themselves for taking advantage of their loyal customers. Oftentimes, these customers were returning customers, and their family had been going to that dealership for years, sometimes even decades, right? But no, they let greed take over, and they wanted to charge markups due to those supply constraints, and well, they lost those customers. And well, I tell you what, it'd be much more beneficial to have a returning customer come back several years down the road versus lining your pockets with a $10,000 markup that time. Well, lesson learned, hopefully. I think prices have just gotten out of touch with reality, right? I mean, many people who would want to come buy this Ford Explorer aren't interested in spending $61,800 for this one, $60,700, $58,500, and the list goes on. People just are not interested in that kind of price tag for this type of vehicle. And on top of those astronomical price tags, you have to worry about the dealership nickel and diming you even more, whether it's with paint protection packages, interior protection package, ADMs, additional dealer markups on top of that MSRP, just cause, you know, due to supply constraints, whatever it is, or you even have to worry about paying 4 times the price of tint, right? It costs generally about $500 to tint a vehicle, a full vehicle tint job, right? They'll still want to get you for $1,000 or $1,200, right? It doesn't make any sense. Which is why a lot of people want that direct-to-consumer purchase model, like we find with Tesla, right? But due to states' dealer franchise laws, it protects dealerships like this. It protects them for a number of reasons, right? They want to keep that labor force here. They don't want them to have any unfair competition, and they want to keep these jobs here, right? They want to keep the local economic impact viable. It appears that a lot of dealerships are just holding out. They're holding out for that government bailout, right? They're afraid to cut their costs. They're afraid to sell vehicles at a loss, it seems. But I firmly believe that the dealerships that are willing to cut their losses and cut their losses early enough, those are going to be the ones that are actually going to gain back some loyal customers, right? If they take a loss on a vehicle, they're going to get a customer who's very happy with that purchase price. And guess what? That customer is going to come back in a few years when they want to swap out that vehicle. Americans want 3 things: reliability, simplicity, and affordability, right? And none of which you really find nowadays with modern vehicles. Even these Ford Rangers that you see in front of me here, price tags range between $45,000 and $52 grand. That used to be full-size pickup truck price, but not anymore. I want to be fair in this video. I generally focus on the higher trimmed, more expensive examples. Like you see over here, many of these F-250s and F-350 diesel pickup trucks are between that $80,000 and $101,000 price range. To be fair though, most of those generally are what you see on dealership lots. So higher trimmed, higher examples, because those are what make dealers money. There's a larger profit margin to be had on higher trimmed examples. This here though is the least expensive Super Duty on the lot. It is an F-250 STX. It doesn't have the 6.7 liter Power Stroke. It has a 6.8 liter V8. $61,235. Just want to be fair, but even then, I feel like that should be the price tag of many of these big guys over here. What do you think? But no, our reality looks more like this, unfortunately. This is an F-350 Platinum, and well, over $101,000. 6 figures for this bad Johnny. How about that? Before digging into the government bailout situation, the good and bad of it, let me remind you quickly of what that 08-09 recession looked like. Back then, President Bush signed into law a bill that created a $700 billion treasury fund to help failing bank assets. A part of that was a $17.4 billion issuance for GM and Chrysler to help bail them out. Of the $700 billion authorized, $443 billion was actually used. This was used to bolster banks, the auto manufacturers, as well as insurance firms. So who pays for a government bailout? That'd be you and I. The American taxpayer ultimately foots the bill for these bailouts to happen. That $700 billion that was authorized, that didn't just come out of thin air, right? Ultimately, we pay that bill. And that becomes the rub for so many people. Same goes for EVs. Those government subsidies and those tax credits or the green credits, we ultimately foot the bill for that too as American taxpayers. So it isn't just free money being applied to these vehicles, we pay for it. Think of it just like insurance, right? Because there are so many very expensive vehicles, high-trim vehicles that are now crashing and needing repair, the cost of repair has gone up astronomically, which has ultimately led to the cost of insurance premiums being paid by all going up astronomically too. There's a reason why we have seen insurance premiums over double throughout the last few years. That's largely due to what we see behind me here, these wildly expensive vehicles that are needing repair ultimately due to accidents that are taking place across the US. In fact, the national average right now is $2,546. That's the national average that an American pays for an annual insurance premium for full coverage, okay? Minimum coverage is $678 for a year. But still, right there, that's quite staggering. So although I just gave you the national average, I think it's important to add that it does vary state to state. Some states are much more expensive than others. For example, states like Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Kentucky, Louisiana, they have higher insurance premiums comparatively to the lowest states, which include Washington, Idaho, Alaska, Hawaii, Ohio. Those are just to name a few, but those are on the lower end. So obviously not an American auto manufacturer, but the Toyota Tacoma truly is a prime example of what can happen when a manufacturer begins to focus less on quality and reputation reliability and focuses more on the price tag, right? They outsourced the Tacoma entirely to Mexico, where they have still hiked up the price tag over 25% over the previous generation. They put a 4-cylinder engine underneath the hood, hybridized option, of course. The automatic transmissions are failing. Quality control just is not there, and they still hiked up that price tag 25% over the previous generation. It makes zero sense. They're saving over 80% in labor cost. And well, us Americans, we did not see those savings. And well, because of that, we are seeing what you see before me here. So many of them are just sitting on dealership lots unsold for over 180 days. No thanks. The Tundra is an example of a company resting on their laurels, right? They figured people would just continue buying the Toyota Tundra because of the nameplate. The Tundra has developed a phenomenal reputation of being extremely reliable, right? Affordable and simplistic. All three of those things have gone out the window on this new platform. In fact, there's a huge safety recall on over 100,000 units of the main crankshaft bearing failing, ultimately causing a loss of motor power and engine failure. How about that? So what about the non-American companies like Toyota, Honda, Kia, Hyundai, you name it? What about them? You generally see them play to political wins within the US, right? They'll kind of shift their decision making, shift their focuses to whatever they believe that the United States government is going to be leaning forward toward in the future anyway. That's why we saw Toyota lean so heavily into green credits and carbon credits. They got a ton of government handouts from the US government, whereas they don't get that in most other countries, right? Which is why you see different types of Toyota still being offered around the world and not here in the US. But they play to those political wins, ultimately what will help them as a company moving forward, because they will not get a government bailout, which is why we'll see companies like Toyota do whatever they can to try to stay in good graces with the US government. You know, there was that clearer shift in focus toward EVs with the previous administration, right? You know, there's more toward that green energy focus. And because of that, they put a lot of their eggs into that basket. Now they're going to have to backpedal a little bit. They also moved production to cheaper labor countries like Mexico for the Toyota Tacoma there, and they're likely planning to do that moving forward with the Toyota Tundra too. There's talk of it anyway. So between those decisions, they're really going to have to get creative and start backpedaling, because what is the new administration going to do? They're going to be adding tariffs on vehicles produced in Mexico for the US market. You would initially think, wow, that's just going to make prices of vehicles go up even more, right? If they get hit with a 25% tariff, that means our vehicles are going to cost maybe 25% more. Wrong. You just saw what you saw over there for good reason. People are not paying the astronomical price tags now. They're absolutely not going to pay any more than that. So they're going to have to figure out a way to eat those profits some other way. They can't add it to the vehicle. So I can think of 4 reasons why a government bailout is good. Number 1, it keeps employees in place. We don't have to lay off a bunch of American employees, and that is huge. So that's the goodness of it, and I think the largest factor to consider, of course, right? Number 2 would be it keeps our economy stabilized, right? Keeps it stabilized during an unknown foreseeable future in a volatile environment. So it keeps a stable economy. Number 3, it lessens our reliance on other countries for our automobiles, right? By keeping those companies alive within the US, at least we're continuously building them here and not needing to rely on other countries to get them. And number 4, it helps shareholders. So when a company is going toward bankruptcy and needing a bailout, well, their share price, their stock price is very low. And if you've bought into that at all and you get a stimulus, that bailout, well, those share price will go up tremendously. And that helps out shareholders anyway. So those are just some benefits to consider. So why is a government bailout bad? Number 1, we as the American taxpayers, we ultimately foot the bill for it. We ultimately are paying that stimulus, right? We're paying that bailout for that bailout to happen. And that is perhaps the largest point for consideration, right? That money doesn't just appear out of thin air. We are footing the bill for it, okay? And it's largely going to be a huge bill that we will all see the pain points from, okay? Number 2, and I think maybe this is arguably more important, but it doesn't teach any greedy dealerships any kind of lesson, right? They feel as though they can continuously take advantage of their customer, charge markups, and deploy greedy tactics, and at the end of the day, they're not going to get their hand slapped. They're just going to get handed a golden parachute. And to me, I find that quite bothersome. In my opinion, it rewards reckless and poor planning behaviors, right? It allows dealerships to believe that they don't need to budget appropriately and plan ahead. And we're just rewarding that type of behavior. It sets a precedent at the end of the day. And I'll make a small plug here. I understand that there's a lot of YouTubers who love to kind of copy the same exact thumbnail, same exact title, and really kind of lean into the clickbait. I understand, guys, but I do firmly believe that we are heading toward a car market crash here in 2025. I do believe that the data is there and the writing truly is on the wall. I wouldn't be reporting on it if I didn't firmly believe that, and I mean that. You know, I mentioned it before, and I don't say this to beat my chest, I promise you, but I do have a doctorate in organizational psychology. It's industrial and organizational psychology, IO Psych PhD. I do firmly love this stuff, and it does align with my personal passion. So that's why I do these videos. But I understand, well, there's a ton of thumbnails out there sharing very similar titles, similar looks, and I get it. But I do firmly believe we're heading that direction. You know, it's always a catch-22 to consider, because when we bail out our American auto manufacturers, what we're ultimately allowing to continue is high payment of jobs for Americans here in the US. And that largely becomes a point of contention, right? We get the UAW strikes that take place because they're demanding more money and more benefits for the employees of these auto manufacturers, which I'm for. And this is why it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I am for that. I want that, right? But at the same time, man, these price tags have gotten just out of this world. They're out of touch with reality. Like I mentioned before, many of these full-size heavy-duty pickup trucks here are priced between $85,000 and $95,000. A couple of them are actually over $100,000 here. That is just unbearable for most people, especially individuals trying to buy this type of pickup truck. They want to use it for work. And well, you'd be afraid to scratch a $100,000 pickup truck at the end of the day. Now, a car market crash is good in the sense that we will begin to see phenomenal deals take place. Before a dealership closes their doors, if a government bailout doesn't happen in time and they actually have to go bankrupt and shut their doors, those are going to be the times where we will see the best deals possible, right? I'm not talking 50% off the sale price of the vehicle. I am talking about 10 to 15% below invoice. Enough to where the dealership is losing plenty of money on that vehicle, but at the end of the day, it's still realistic and reasonable. On top of those savings, I would expect a phenomenal interest rate if you're financing. I'm talking a 0% interest rate over 60 or 72 months, or maybe as high as 1.9%. Expect both, several $1,000s off of that MSRP and a phenomenal APR. Now, if I were Buick, I'd be focusing on really 2 things, right? Trying to build a reliable and affordable platform. If they can build a reliable and affordable platform, that'll put them in a position to actually stay afloat throughout the rough times ahead. And I would still comfortably argue that this Buick Enclave Sport Touring needs to be in the $40,000 range. I personally believe we should not bail out our automotive manufacturers, because they're the ones who deployed these greedy tactics. They've allowed their dealerships to continue forward with these tactics and really take advantage of the American people. We shouldn't reward reckless businesses and reckless behaviors and poor planning of dealerships and these companies at the expense of the American people, American families. That's just my 2 cents on it. A part of the rub for me right now is many of these dealerships are acting as though we're not in the current state that we really are. Like I mentioned before, we've seen that 120% growth in inventory for new vehicles throughout the last year and a half, 2 years. That is quite staggering, and they're acting as though that's not happening. People are just not buying vehicles right now, and they're just covering their ears and closing their eyes to it, hoping that that golden parachute in form of a government bailout is going to save them. Call me petty all you want, or vengeful perhaps, but I personally have zero sympathy for dealerships that took advantage of people, right? You know, they just lined their pockets. Times were tough for everybody, but still they felt the need and had the audacity to take advantage of you and me and charge markups over MSRP when everybody was struggling. I have zero sympathy for that, and personally, I could care less if they go under. I'm a firm believer of karma, and I'm a firm believer of you reap what you sow. And well, this is a grave that I think many dealerships dug on their own. You can't feel bad for them. Now, although I personally don't want it to happen, I do believe a government bailout will take place should the need arise. I mean, we hear from the Trump administration that we want to keep jobs in America. We want to keep vehicles made in America by Americans, which I support that too, right? But I also don't support the greedy tactics being deployed. I feel like a lesson should be learned in some shape or form. That's my personal thoughts on it. But Trump, he wants to keep jobs here in America, made by Americans, which that's always good, right? But is there a way for us to kind of find that happy medium? And that's where I hope the next administration is going to get creative. I hope they're willing to maybe even add or apply those tariffs, the added tariffs that we're applying to vehicles made in Mexico and cheaper labor countries, add those tariffs and maybe use that to help for the rehabilitation of our automotive giants here in the US. That's just an idea. You know, we can expect Trump to lean forward with fossil fuels and make sure that we're bringing the cost of fuel down. So that's going to be a helpful consideration anyway. But ultimately, keeping jobs in America is why I believe a government bailout will take place. We don't want to lose out on our automotive giants and then need to lean on other countries for our automobiles. I don't think that would happen within this current administration. You know, right now, many vehicles are coming with a pretty substantial discount. When it comes to Silverado pickup trucks, being able to get them for anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 off MSRP is pretty commonplace. I would still try to fight for that 10 to 15% below invoice. Here we have 10 grand off this particular Silverado. Again, you find that nearly everywhere right now. I do firmly believe that we can make a lot of positive headway if we adjusted how much we pay our auto manufacturer CEOs. For context, GM, General Motors, we pay Mary Barra, that CEO, just under $28 million per year. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, $26.5 million. And well, although not technically an American company, but oversees Ram, Stellantis, Carlos Tavares, $39.5 million per year. He recently resigned, stepped down. We all heard about that. But just for context, let me paint a picture for you. If we were to pay 500 employees $79,000, only then would it equate to how much we paid that one CEO. It's sad that we've gotten to the point where only these smaller subcompact SUVs are the vehicles that can actually sell. In that price range between $30,000 and $38,000 is what people can actually afford. They can only afford those monthly payments, and that to me has gotten pretty sad. Many mid-sized pickup trucks now cost what full-size pickup trucks used to just a few years ago. This particular Chevy Colorado ZR2, over $61,000 for it. Absolutely insane. Alright guys, we'll wrap up the video there. I'm truly curious to know what you guys think. Should we bail out our automotive giants if the need should arise? I personally do believe that we are heading toward a car market crash here in 2025. I believe the data's there and the writing's on the wall. So let me know what your thoughts are on the matter. Do you think a government bailout would be in the best interest of the American people? Because like I mentioned, we, the American taxpayers, we are ultimately footing the bill for it should the need arise. So let me know what your thoughts are. As always, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to tune in these videos. Your support means a lot, and it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. If you haven't already, I respectfully request that you please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a ton. Until next time.